Hello, traders, and welcome to the weekend update with Steve Gans. So, what I want to take a look at here first is the SPX, but I also want to put a caveat out there. This is election week. Obviously, this is something that has been increasing some volatility in our markets and raising a lot of questions throughout the United States here for probably a couple years now. All that is maybe going to come to a head this week. We shall see. But anyhow, the bottom line is that is such a monstrous news event that will kind of take over some technical analysis. What I mean by that is normal technical analysis, we can kind of draw some conclusions based on how the market has been acting up to this point. The natural conclusion here is that we are in a definite uptrend, a fairly consistent uptrend in a channel here. And so that, I think, will be the prevailing sentiment even after the election. The question is, depending on whatever your political views are, whether or not if the wrong person, and I don't know who the wrong person is, gets in place, is that going to tank the market to some extent? And if so, to what extent? And I have learned over the years that many times when there is a big market move based off of news, what that tends to do is it simply tends to increase the speed at which the market does what it's probably going to do anyway. So, for example, that could potentially cause a sell-off, but over time, I would expect a sell-off to maybe drop back into this, 5,400 range or so anyway. That's about a 10% pullback, which is normal and natural for markets, and it's healthy for markets. So, this could potentially happen, and that would be perfectly normal. If we broke this downtrend, I'd certainly start to get a little more concerned. But in reality, what I'm really probably expecting here is this block, which I drew many months ago in here. I'm thinking this block is probably going to hold. So regardless of the election outcome and what people's opinions are of that as far as it relates to the market, if people don't like the outlook, and by people, again, I mean people holding shares of stock, I could see sell-off into this channel somewhere, into this box, possibly as low as the 56 or 55, 50 area, somewhere in there. If whatever the outcome is perceived well, I see us probably rallying back up to the top of this current, well, not current, the all-time highs, right up here around that 58.80 range. Maybe a little pullback then, and probably breaking to a newer high. Now, if we break to a newer high on election results, I would expect a pullback then back to this 58.60 area. So that's kind of what I feel like we'll see by this time next week. Again, we're going to see some weird stuff play out. The futures markets are going to act probably pretty weird on Tuesday night if we get a chance to have some sense of outcome. We may not, but if we do have a sense of some outcome, we're probably going to see some moves in the futures market because, of course, they trade 24/7. So I'd urge you to just kind of take a look at that after hours or late at night on Tuesday night or early morning on Wednesday. And that might give you a sense as to what's going to happen. All that said, I know in prior elections there have been moves in the futures market that have been as much as 500 points when some winner was announced, only to have that fully erased by the open the next morning. So again, it'll be a little bit of what I call grab your bucket of popcorn, watch the election results, but at the same time, watch the futures market and kind of see what happens as we go through potential announcement of elections. So anyhow, that is SPX. Now, I want to show you the VIX as well, the volatility index, because while it's up a little bit, given the amount of sell-off that we had here on Thursday and Friday, VIX is really not elevated much. It hasn't popped above that, 23 or 24 mark. So that's also maybe telling me that there's not as much fear out there, not as much people buying insurance right now. is what I maybe would have thought. So that tells me that maybe there's not going to be a significant downside move. And by a significant downside move, again, I'm talking that potential, 10% downside move that might come to the bottom of this channel. Based on what I'm seeing right now, I think that's a less likely scenario. Now, one other thing that I want to show you is SPY. I had been looking at SPY in the past, and I had drawn these channels on SPY. So we run in this up channel for months, and then we get a sell-off, and then we start a new channel. As soon as we break to those new highs, we get a new higher high here, and we're getting higher lows. That defines a new channel. And then again, that channel broke down here, and now we ran again. And if I were to take this channel and kind of extend this out here, we could see that, we're kind of just touching the bottom of that channel right now. And again, that is somewhat of a bullish signal right now because it hasn't broken down out of this channel. It hasn't breached these prior lows. So as of right now, we've been making higher highs and we've been making higher lows. So unless this breaks down and comes below here and maybe breaks these tops, which again, the fact that we had this high here, a sell-off, this high here, a sell-off, got to that high, punched through it, pulled right back to it. What used to be resistance, in this case, this 564 range on the SPY, will often then become support, and that support was held right here when we pulled back to that same range, that 564, 565 range, and then made new highs from there. So again, I think based on the sell-off that we had the other day, based on the fact that volatility, the VIX is not really spiking to new highs, that we have a channel here, that we had a channel in SPY, all of that leads me to believe, at least right now, like we might hold up in this area, or maybe we have a little bit of a pullback. So again, depending on what happens in elections and how those elections are not only received, but adhered to, not disputed heavily, etc., to where we could be months from figuring out a winner, I think that will all add uncertainty into the market that could kind of change this outlook a little bit. So let's also take a look at RUT, which is essentially the equivalent or the big index that kind of mirrors IWM. And same basic thing here. So RUT has been flirting with highs here, sold off, came back up, sold off, came back up, sold off. Right now, RUT is in this channel from about 2170 up to around 2300. I would anticipate RUT staying in that channel. Now, it could potentially drop down to this uptrend line. That would not be out of character for it to drop down to here. Any drop here below the bottom of this channel or this box that I drew previously, that would be concerning to me if we dropped out of the bottom of this box. Again, I don't really expect that or anticipate that at this time. My actual expectation is that we maybe dip into this box a little bit, possibly down here around 2170, somewhere in there, and then potentially rally back off of that. Now, we have VIX, the volatility index for SPX. There's also a volatility index for RUT, and that is called RVX. So this is a way to kind of see what the volatility is on the RUT index. And we can see a similar story here. While it did spike up on Thursday, it didn't really break to any new highs. It's been running around the peaks here have been around the 29 mark, and it came up to right around there on Thursday, and then pulled back off there a little bit on Friday. So there's nothing here in RUT volatility either, at least right now, that's indicating a lot of fear in the market. There's not a massive amount of people buying insurance on positions. So that kind of wraps up here the weekend update from the market standpoint. All right, traders, let's take a look now at the 3 open positions that I have. Now, again, I am keeping my positions light. Now, you'll recall that one of the positions, which was a diagonal position, closed out last week. I closed that position out, I believe it was on Thursday. And I think it was about a 14% profit or so. So that was a nice profit for about a week and a half. And that trade went pretty much as expected. I put it on when I felt the market was at a high level and likely going to retrace. It was a diagonal skewed to the downside. Our market then pulled back, allowed me to thin the position once. And then the second time I closed out the second, I put on 2 diagonals. I closed out the second diagonal, locking in that profit. Now, I also had this butterfly on, and this last week I added to this butterfly. I laid a butterfly over the top of this one, and it's been holding up just fine. This is, I don't believe, an accurate number, that down 142. I think the bid-ask spreads are just wide here as the markets are closed over the weekend. And on Friday, that was kind of bouncing around. It was down 20 bucks. It was up 20 bucks, which really is a good position. I like to see that, especially when my expectations based off of the review I just did of the indexes is that we're likely to move back up a little bit or maybe stabilize in this area, assuming there's no real crazy funny business surrounding the election. So I'd like where I'm at on this position. I'm going to kind of just leave it set there. When the volatility comes out of the market, once the election results are finalized, there will be volatility that will come out regardless of what side you're on. A decision will have been made, and then that level of unknowingness, if you want to call it that, will go away. And then that will release a little pressure on this, which should allow for a little bit of profitability to creep in. Again, assuming our market stays in a general wide range here of 5,700 to 5,800 or so. The FTNT wheel strategy is cranking along just fine. Again, as this continues to decay, there's only 12 days left on this. This is going to start decaying very rapidly. And as this decays, it's going to be approaching about a $2,000 profit. And at that point, as we get about to that expiration date, I will be looking to roll this again if I'm not yet assigned. And keep in mind, every time I'm rolling this, I believe that would be the 5th, maybe the 6th roll. I'm taking in premium by selling new puts. And again, so far, I mean, if we get to this expiration and I'm above 75, which I right now expect I would be, this I would have taken in, I'm selling 2 of them. So I will have taken in $1,000 on each one of those 2 puts, lowering my cost basis by $10 on this position. So what that means is if this were to fall back to just under 75 for the sake of argument, I'm going to use 74.99 and it gets put to me at 75, my real cost basis in this is only going to be $65. That's because I took in premium every time I sold those puts and rolled this. So that's kind of the goal here, is to have a way to lower my cost basis using this wheel strategy. And then I opened up this butterfly a ways out. And also, this butterfly was not really done at the money. Under normal circumstances, I like to open a 50-leg, 60-leg butterfly. This one is 50-70. That does give me a little more downside risk. It does give me a little more positive delta in this trade. And again, my opinion is, as you saw in my analysis, that our markets are likely to go up a little bit or stabilize where they are. And if that happens, this thing is going to decay into a 10% profit if our market stays up in here anywhere. And I will likely adjust this to maybe bring in a little bit more, maybe get that boosted to 15 or 20%. Again, depending on the market action that I see later this week. And there's a few different ways I can do that. I can simply roll this right wing up. I could also roll up the left wing to take out a little downside risk at the same time if I wanted to. I could add in a call spread up here if I felt that the market was not going to run beyond a certain point. So those are a couple different things I can do or consider doing on this trade as the week or next couple of weeks progress. I've only been in this trade 3 days. I was able to get in this trade when the market was selling off Thursday and volatility was higher. That allowed me to get into this trade in what I consider a pretty favorable position right now. I've got lots of downside room if the market were to, in fact, go down and hit that lower threshold that I said maybe it could hit. This, while it's certainly going to show a little bit of a loss, it's still essentially going to be under my tent here, which means that when it starts to cane, that's going to be favorable for me. So those are the 3 positions. After election results are out and the market settles maybe for a day or so, assuming that there is in fact a decision and it doesn't go to a bunch of court battles and things along those lines, I will look at evaluating the market then and starting to look to get back into, the maybe 4 to 5 trades that I normally like to carry. So that's it for now, everyone. Take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you this week.